Bill and I met 2 years ago now. Robert was there. It was at Collision Conference down in New Orleans, and Bill told the crowd actually, so for all you biz dev folks, here's a little in, that he hated getting emails because they were boring. So Robert and I crafted a really creative, I think it was like a haiku or something, about a carrier pigeon. And sure enough, that was the start of what has been a very fun friendship. And
it did work.
It did. He responded immediately, so there you go.
I don't generally check emails. So.
That's what it was. So without further ado, Bill Maynard is the Senior Director, Global Senior Director of Innovation and Enterprise Architecture at Coca-Cola. I think that there are three of my favorite buzzwords: innovation, enterprise, and architecture in there. So with maybe we can decipher what that actually means in your world. Been at Coke now for 7 years. I know you've held similar roles, but of varying focuses. And but what I know is they've always been at the intersection of what's new and different and technology. And so I would love to hear a little bit about what you do. Let's just start there. Let's put titles aside and hear about what that means.
Yeah, I think you have to start the idea of being innovative by saying if you have innovation in your title, you're not doing it right. So having innovation in my title is something I've been trying to work out of, right? Because it just doesn't make any sense to have it. So what I do in part of the role of enterprise architecture is the really simple version of it is we build stuff, right? We build things. We take what our company's global strategies are. What we're trying to do at Coca-Cola right now is really about a growth strategy, right? We're not exactly known for being a growth company for the last 20 years, so we're working on changing that. So we've enabled these strategies. My team, what we do is we build technology roadmaps, right? So at the end of the day, we look business strategy, we try to determine where we have gaps in our technology and where we have an opportunity to do things that are a little bit better, a little bit different, hopefully great, right? We always aim for great, but sometimes I'll settle for less. But you know, at the end of the day, we're building a technology roadmap. We're looking at that roadmap and trying to decide how best we can fit, how best we can enable the strategies of our company. And sometimes that's technology, sometimes that's process. Sometimes that's a lot of different things. It's it's social engineering in many aspects of what we do, right? You know, I don't code as much as I used to, but at the end of the day, I spend a lot of time around people who are trying to get things done, and it's really about showing them, like, look, you take a step back, figure out where these things fit in our stack, figure out how we move that forward, and it's all about moving the ball. So we build stuff. You know, at the end of the day, we build stuff. We try to be innovative. We try to be innovative in a lot of ways, right? But ultimately, when there are things that are, when there are big bets, we take shots at big bets.
Right.
But when there are things that are kind of, I'll say SAP, ERP stuff. I know we're being recorded. I'm going to get killed for saying that.
Sorry, PR.
Sorry about that, SAP. But yeah, when in those spaces, like, you can't really innovate as much. You can be innovative in ways. You can move to the cloud. You can try to enable things a little bit lighter. But ultimately, we're looking for places where we can really have a huge impact. We have to do that. We have to know what our roadmap is.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more. But any time that we have these sessions, we always do a little bit of a pre-interview, kind of really just figure out what I can't ask you about. But
was there anything you couldn't ask me?
No, you didn't. You said nothing is off limits. So as everybody is thinking of your own questions, know that. So we talked a lot about that around placing those big bets, around how executives might get excited, and we talked a lot about toys, and we'll get into that a little bit later. I think it would be helpful, talking about stepping back, to just say, how do you define innovation? And that doesn't necessarily always have to be through the lens of how Coca-Cola defines it, but you in your world, how do you define it?
You know what? I would honestly tell you, I think there's, again, putting a label on it to talk about, innovation is being disruptive. Innovation is what it's. I don't think it's any of that, and I'll be honest. I think my definition changes probably daily. To me, to be innovative is just to have, like, literally no fear, right? You take chances and have no fear of what you're trying to accomplish. If that means building something, if that means buying something, I look to be disruptive, and I look to do things that other people. It's not necessarily like, I'm not trying to do something nobody else has done, right? I'm not going to go buy New Balance and turn into Steve Jobs and have the turtleneck and all that stuff. T-shirt will probably be enough. But I'm really trying to find, for me, I'm just really trying to find the best opportunity to do something well and do something different, right? And when you work in a corporation, there are so many constraints about what you're trying to do, right? It could be money, it could be resources, it could be a million different things. So for me, trying to be innovative is really just trying to think a little bit differently and sort of break the mold. Right? If the answer is because we've always done it this way, I'm generally not going to do it that way. And so it's, you know, oh, we always do that. No, not today. We're going to try something different. So to me, being innovative is just, you know, having absolutely no fear of trying something different. If that means I fail, oh well, you know, that's okay too.
Yeah, we can get in a little bit around the failure piece of it, because I think that, you know, you've had some successes, so that makes the fear of failure a little bit better to tolerate there. But I think that a lot of times what happens is that folks in this role, they are new to it, maybe new to the role or new to the organization, and organizations and corporations are not necessarily known for being, you know, flexible and limber and forgiving in times. And so I would be curious to know, from your perspective, how do you, I think for you as an individual, no fear, I know you, so I think that's part of kind of how you're wired and probably what you were tasked with to come in with this, but how do you let your team know? How do you let the people around you? How do you say, IT, procurement, legal, like, hey guys, we can do this in a way that can be fearless?
Yeah, so that's, I guess that comes to the social engineering part,
yep.
right? Like, you know, our team works very differently than if you've been around enterprise architecture teams. They're typically guys that are, you know, about my age, you know, 27. You know, it's very process, it's very governance driven, it's all this, don't nod your head, no. It's all of those things kind of wired in, like, you know, it's all about you know, here's a process and here's a rubber stamp how you get through.
Yeah.
Our team's just not built that way. We're not organized that way, and we don't act that way. We're different, right? I mean, you've met a lot of people on my team. We're weird. You know, I like to think that we're just a really, really smart team. I also happen to think I'm lucky to be the dumbest guy on the team, right? And just surrounded by all these incredibly smart people that are very creative and think really differently. So a lot of times what we have to do is incubate an idea, and we do it a little bit internally, right? So if we want to get something out there, I don't like to go to market with a half-baked idea. I like to go with, here's what we have, and here's how we think it works, and here's the place. So our team generally spends a lot of time sort of incubating things, thinking about how we bring things forward. And then the social engineering part starts, where you go to, you know, procurement's my favorite example. I'm going to use it forever. You go to procurement, you go to legal, you go to, you know, the right executives. You got to find the right senior leadership to make sure that they get it, to make sure that they understand it's not a, you know, it's not a science project, right? You can do things in a vacuum and it can come out like a science project. It just doesn't connect. We try to connect it, and then we try to connect it with the people that it matters to, and explain it to them. And it's not about, you know, again, enterprise architecture, if you're into it, you'll hear a lot of things about TOGAF and, you know, this architecture and, you know, swarm architecture. You know, nobody understands that but us. Nobody understands that but enterprise architecture and other architects, and most of the time we're not writing a check. So, you know, we try to translate things in a language that people understand, and we try to bring it back to the business. Then we bring the other groups in and make sure everybody's behind it, so that we can move it forward. Because if I have a great idea and I keep it with me, it's just a great idea that, you know, for me, it probably runs out of my head 15 minutes after I have it. And it makes it that much harder to get things done. When I have a whole team of people who understand it and buy in, and that means not just my team, but all the other teams, it's a lot easier to carry that load.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you said there that I think are interesting. So one, your executive sponsorship, or whoever the business sponsorship, getting the right people involved. I find that sometimes folks that sit in this role of innovation or moving ideas forward, they go to the top, but they forget to have a lot of empathy for that mid-level, the people that have to buy in, that it might be changing their world, their day-to-day, and to your point, making it relevant to them, making it relatable and ownable, and that this is a part of the, you know, they can be a part of the solution. I think that's where a culture of innovation, I think that's where there's realizing a gap in what's happening, and I think that, you know, having empathy for the people that you're trying to then sell this into or get bought in, and realizing how it could disrupt their world, or maybe that is, you know, there is some fear behind it. I think that's an interesting piece that we don't hear about a lot.
There's, you know, if everybody has ownership of a great idea, whatever that idea is, you know, if everybody has ownership of that idea, you know, everybody owns it, right? So if it's just one guy pounding his chest again, talking about how cool this thing is, it just doesn't work, right? It's again, in a company the size of Coke, you get things enabled because people are excited about it. Right? And if it means, you know, if it means it's changing some of the stuff that they do, if it's doing it in a positive light, and you're bringing them into the conversation early, right? Again, fully vetted idea, bring people into the conversation, show them what's out there. You're gonna get them, right? You're gonna win them over, right? Because ultimately, you know, at Coca-Cola, you know, I've been there like 7 years now, right? It's the longest I've ever worked at a company in my life because I have, you know, massive ADD and about, you know, 15 minutes into working someplace, I'm like, all right, what's next? But I've been here, you know, been here like 7 years, and you know, part of the success that we've had is, you know, we tried some things when we got there the first year. When I first walked in the door, I had all the answers. I was pretty sure I knew everything, right? Pretty sure I had it all. It's like being 17, like you know everything, but you have no clue what's going on. I knew it all, and when I got there, I, you know, pounding ideas forward. I just wasn't getting anywhere. I started getting places when, you know, a friend of mine told me a long time ago, I know you're a smart guy. Make everybody else around you smart. And that way everybody gets in, right? Great ideas, make it everybody's idea. Great stuff, you know, great way to collaborate with people, make it everybody's. Make it. You mentioned community, right? IT is a community, and when you bring your colleagues into a conversation, you're gonna win.
Yeah.
Did I answer that question, or did I just completely
You
jump
did.
around it?
You did. I'm going to turn to the audience. You know, this kind of speaker series that we do, we really try to make it a dialogue, that this is really for you all to get out of it what you had hoped as well. So I've got a lot of questions here, but if there are any that, as we're going through this, whether it's on that point or others, please raise a hand, and we're happy to hear from everyone here.
Could you, when you explain it, could you just maybe cite a real example instead of talking in theory?
Which thing?
Any of those? Any examples that you worked at? The product is something that you brought to life, and how you.
Oh yeah. Let's talk. Thank you. Nice segue. Let's talk about. So we have a program called the Bridge at Coca-Cola. I would say it's an incubator startup, but it's a little bit different than that. It's a little bit better, in my opinion, a little bit better than an incubator startup. Of course, I would say it's a little bit better. Yeah, only slight advice. My former colleague Alan Boehm actually created this idea and brought it to the enterprise architecture team as, you know, here's a great way to do this. And he worked with another colleague of mine, Anthony Newstead. And if you guys are in the startup community in Atlanta and you don't know Anthony, you'll meet him eventually because he's everywhere. You know, so this was an idea not just to bring an incubator, but to bring something to the company that did a couple of things. You know, give us an opportunity to bring and show like true innovative ideas and small companies into Coca-Cola. And you know, not just, you know, okay, we're going to look at 10 startups a year and wow, how cool is that? We weren't going to invest in them, right? We also weren't going to take any stake in them. What we're going to do is bring this really good, talented base of people into our business problems and select them based on that. So the idea was, you know, we're going to bring this, again, I'll say incubator, but it's kind of not right, but we're going to bring this concept into the company, we're going to light it up and just make it go. How does that work, right? To answer your question, how did that happen? Start with the idea, right? Bring the idea forward with a great senior leader, Ed Steineke, who's our former CIO. We got his involvement in it. We got a bunch of business leaders' involvement in it. We bring this program in, we select 10 startups that can help us solve some business problems, and then we just open the world of Coca-Cola up to these startups and let them go off and run and do pilots and do what they need to do. You know, how did it start becoming successful? And it's like its 5th year now. It started becoming successful because the first time we brought them in, we didn't quite understand what happens when you bring a startup to a company like Coca-Cola. And generally what happens is that we beat it to death with just tons and tons of paperwork. So the learning process and how we got better with this is, you know, we enable this great idea. We engage a bunch of people with it. We forgot to engage procurement. We forgot to engage legal. We forgot to engage risk management. And you know, while you give, you know, a system of 700,000 employees an opportunity to look at startups, we didn't actually give them the tools in order to enable those startups. So year 2, right? So we did pretty well the first year. We brought it all in, and everything worked really well. It was hard to get things through the process, but we in the second year we started. You know, again, you wire up procurement, you wire up legal. You get these guys understanding that you need smaller MSAs and things like that to bring it on. And again, we're in our 5th year of being very successful with that program. Now it's run directly out of our CIO's office right now, a guy named Barry Simpson, who has a very strong vision about how, you know, you're solving problems with these kinds of ideas. I think, you know, my example of probably one of the best things that's happened from the enterprise architecture team at Coke is that, right? We had a lot of people, and you'll hear a lot of noise, right? People say innovate, innovate all the time. right? Again, it'll be stricken from my, the next time you see me on LinkedIn, it'll be gone from my title, I promise you. But the idea is, you know, people say it all the time. People say innovate all the time. And, you know, you don't really enable it until you start bringing things online. And when you are successful with something like that at Coke, right, it's changed our culture, which I think is really powerful. It's changed the way we think about dealing with small companies. It's changed some of the processes of procurement and legal. And we have this great event that happens once a year where people come and really see that we're doing this and enabling this stuff. And we have a bunch of really great success stories too. There's a cool website somewhere, I'm sure there's an actual URL somebody could give you, I just don't know it. But there's a lot of really great success stories around that. So that's I guess maybe kind of our shining example, I think.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
Great. Yeah.
Patrick Ferris. I'm actually the Bridge Community Liaison for SunTrust.
Oh, okay.
I actually wanted to ask, since this is our second year in the program, how do startups, like the Bridge startups or others, fit into your enterprise architecture or innovation strategy?
Did you pepper me on questions?
I
love those two questions. So I mentioned that we build these technology roadmaps, right? So my direct responsibility, the one I actually sit down and build, is marketing, which, as you can imagine, there's a million pieces in marketing at Coca-Cola. It's a little bit of a thing when you look at it out on a big sheet and see what it looks like. We build these technology roadmaps. We understand where everything is, and most importantly, what we do is identify the gaps, right? So when we look at bridge companies in the Atlanta Bridge, for example. It's actually my favorite bridge. The community is my favorite, but we kind of know where we're playing, right? So in the marketing stack, I know what I need. It's all been vetted against our business and been vetted against our existing stack. I know what I need, and I know where I can take risk, and I know where I can, you know, again, I know where I can sort of say, I'm gonna take a big bet here, or I'm gonna take a soft bet here. We lay it all out against the enterprise architecture. So a reference architecture, to me, right? If you don't have a reference architecture for, you know, every domain in your business, you're missing, right? You're missing stuff because you don't know what you have, you don't know what you need, right? You don't know where you get those bets. So the enterprise architecture team being responsible for all of those roadmaps and that tech stack and the reference architectures around that, that's how we identify the gaps. That's how we start picking companies. Makes it easier for us.
Yeah, that audit process is one that we talked a lot about. I anecdotally, and again, we'll sure a lot of folks in the audience get this, that new technology, new buzzwords become really exciting. An executive was watching, you know, CNBC this morning. They heard that blockchain is the next thing. They're coming to you saying we got to be in blockchain. What are we doing? And that can become really a vicious cycle and a productivity suck in many organizations to either figure out what is our perspective on it, or to say, I don't know, should we be in it? And I think the audit process that you described, it gives a little bit of rigor and also boundary around that. So when you have, you know, maybe these new ideas introduced, it's not to say just a shutdown of no, we don't want to go do that, but it's also then here are the priorities that we've laid out as it supports the business objectives. And it becomes very difficult then for an executive or anyone else in the company to say, no, don't do that. I mean, there's a lot of logic behind it. So I think if you could explain a little bit around how you developed that process and the different parties that are involved.
Yeah, so, I mean, let's start with the idea of a reference architecture, right? And why we find this important. You know, again, when I first got to Coke, we didn't spend a lot of time on reference architecture because it was such a big, you know, there was just a lot of moving pieces and we needed to fix some things really quickly. You know, Barry has our CIO, Barry, sometimes has just a really strong vision of, you know, let's know what we have. Let's have a real reference architecture for every space. So, you know, when you start doing that, it enables you to do a couple of things, right? We're a really big company and, you know, I'm sure we spend a lot of money. Actually, I know we spend a lot of money. Again, back to video. Can we get it? But at the end of the day, how do you take a reference architecture and start to manage things, right? So you look at our reference architecture, you know our tech stack, you know our vendors. If we have duplication in places, that's actually money that's going away to do that. That's actually keeping us from being innovative in spaces. So, right, so we use the idea of picking those reference architectures up and knowing our gaps, knowing where we have, you know, knowing where we have, you know, we're solid, we have a good strategy, and we have a great strategy for content management, right? We have a great platform for that. And it's in place, we have a team around it, it works well. We have all of our brand signs on it. We don't spend a lot of time there.
Right.
We don't have to because it's settled. but we don't double that up, and we don't have 14 different content management systems, we just have one. When you do that, that allows us to take that money and, you know, shift it to something a little bit more interesting, so that we can take risks. So, you know, we start with a reference architecture. You know, that helps us build that roadmap. It helps us understand where we're at. And then that, to me, I feel like those are the things that actually start to enable technology and enable us to be a little bit more innovative, right? Because we know where we're at, we know what we're best at, and we know where we have gaps.
Do you have the business coming to you, or are you going to the business to identify opportunities?
It's a little bit of both,
okay.
right? You know, again, there's some very creative people at Coca-Cola. You know, again, I work with the marketing team, so there are some incredibly creative marketers at Coca-Cola. You know, but we have some incredibly creative supply chain people as well. So it works a little bit both ways. We have a lot of people coming to us. To me, it's gotten really good in the last couple of years with Barry. You know, just as he's kind of shifted IT to be very, very focused on delivery. You know, a lot of the business people come to us, but they've done a great job of already vetting the ideas.
Okay.
Right. So, you know, I'm not having to spend 8 weeks evaluating every technology, because they've done a lot of that work ahead of time. They've done a lot of that with the solution architects in their domain, and they actually come to us. It's kind of last mile. They know they have a gap. They work with us up front to help identify the gap, and they go off and kind of find it. So, it's a good rhythm of back and forth. And I've seen this in other organizations where it can be kind of like another marketer brings another platform, but it just hasn't been that way, right? In the last 2 or 3 years, it's gotten so focused on where we have gaps and what people know, that it's really calmed that noise down a lot. And again, people are working in a very focused method.
Yeah, great. Go ahead.
Hi, Liz Randall from Turner. Hi. Curious about your innovation process. Is there a consensus among your organization of you have an idea now of what happens? Or is it still, how do you come through the organization for ideas that are not marketing or specific to your client group?
It's organic. It depends on which thing, right? So I'm in IT, but we have a lot of ideas in IT. We meet with a lot of different startups and VCs, where we just kind of curate ideas, right? So, and there are actually people that do that for us. They randomly curate ideas and say, we've got this or this. It comes up to the organization a lot of different ways. Technical and R&D have their own method. They have a whole framework for how they do it. Brand, ventures and brands, they have a framework for how they do it as well. For IT, we have a framework for how we do it, but again, it all goes back to building into our digital framework for growth. And all the other areas are actually doing the same thing, right? So we use that if you've probably seen it online if you read anything about the company lately, but our digital strategy for growth that is led out of the enterprise architecture team, the development of that. Michelle Ruth actually led that a little while back for us. That's our map. That's what we go with, and the rest of the organization is following that as well. It bubbles up like it does at any company, right? There are channels that you get it to, and then there are just you find the right people and you get the right idea going.
Talk a little bit about the growth strategy and growth framework there.
Yeah, so I only know this story because it's been told to me. I wasn't actually in the room, but I'm told our CEO, a guy named James Quincy, literally went to a board, took a marker, and drew out a little diagram for what he thought the growth strategy for the company looked like. And again, it's a CEO, brainstorming ideas, and I'm sure he had a room full of people with him, but he whips this thing out on a board, and it's probably the most clear, most concise thing you've ever seen, right? And these are the things that we need to do to enable growth in our company. That goes forward, right? So that starts to pull forward, and they start identifying, I think there are 15 key strategies for the company. It's things like e-commerce, marketing in a digital world, talent, an agile organization. There's a few, again, you can find it online. The ones that I sort of rally around are always about marketing and supply chain and talent, right? I mean, a company like ours, if you can constantly bring in and refresh talent, that's a really powerful thing. So it's again, this is what we've been marching to about the last. I think you released it like a year ago.
Okay.
And it's for a company this size to see us all get so refined on the things that we're focused on. It's clearly it's brilliant, right? Clearly, James is like, he must be brilliant to just whip it out on a board and have a whole
And we'll
company
keep
come
that
around.
in the video clip for you to play
So
that.
much, thanks so much. I don't know, it'll be perfect for me. But yeah, for him to be able to just put that on a board and just brainstorm the idea, and for the company, just a few months later, to start rallying around and really start driving ourselves to that. I think it speaks volumes for what's happening in the company. It speaks volumes for how we're the company, again, is, you think of a big, slow, old company, and in the time that I've been there, you see it start to turn, and it's getting faster, and it's getting, I'd say it's getting leaner, and we're actually starting to do things a lot better. That framework to me just kind of gave us the roadmap to how to get started.
Excellent. Go for it.
Assuming you're really happy with what you're doing right now, you do it for another
I'm never
2.5
really happy with what I do
years
ever.
or
It
whatever.
just depends on what day I wake up.
What do you think you want to do next?
What do I want to do next? That's such a big question. I'd love to retire, and I think the rhythm guitar player job for Van Halen's taken, so I would probably, I honestly want to go work with startups, like directly. I've talked to a couple of people about just, working at a venture fund, where you get the opportunity to just be around a community of people that are constantly creating. I wouldn't put a label if it's going to be corporate, if it's going to be consulting or whatever, but I really like, for me, I just like working around that kind of community, right? I want to do things fast, I want to do things really quick. Again, I have a very short attention span, so I've already forgotten your question, but I'm kidding.
I think that's like a common thing for folks who are working on innovation in a corporate environment. That's what they want to do next all the time, so we're also like trying to think, how do you keep folks like that in corporate, although that's not what they really want to do.
I think it's okay to let them go, right? Like, I think it's like, how do you keep them? Like, don't keep them. Right? Let them go. I know more. I guarantee you, I know more about bringing a startup through a company than, through a company process. I'm pretty sure I know more about it than maybe anybody at any venture fund ever. I've done it for 7 years, and it's a process, and it's. I would say sometimes that process is different for every company. What better idea? And this is kind of what the bridge is about to a degree. Like, what better idea than to turn me loose into a startup community and say, okay, here's what you have to do, right? So don't go to a corporation and freak out when they ask you for $10 million insurance policy. Just tell them you can't do it, and let's figure out how to go rewrite that, right? So I think let them go, right? Like, don't try to keep them. Let them go. They'll come back, right? Good people will always come back to a great brand. I love working at Coca-Cola. I think I literally was looking out at my apartment window a little while back, going, hey, I work at that building, which I think is really cool. It's very Atlanta. It's very personal to be in Atlanta working for Coca-Cola. I think it's just, if you're going to be an IT guy in marketing and you live in Atlanta and you don't work at Coca-Cola, come on. So,
no offense to everyone else here.
Everybody can come through the gates a little bit. But I think it's just, let people go. Let them take those experiences, bring those into that startup community, and then let that startup community, how do you keep great people working at startups? Don't. Like, they're going to work, that startup, it's a great startup, it's going to become a corporation eventually. Even Google's not as innovative as most people would think, right? It's a big company, and they have a lot of process. So let them go, let them come back. Again, this is a community, right? It's a community of people, and we all think that way. It'll work out. That sounds a little Californian, but.
We did say this was part therapy, so just
got
that. I think I saw some other hands in the back. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Hey, I'm Zach. I got a long time ago to work on a project at Coca-Cola with marketers about improving the velocity with which information might move through some of these very big organizations. Are there things happening kind of in your world and sort of from your technology perspective about that very difficult social, personal, interpersonal networks, right, that power how Coke actually works? I think the kind of key point we remember from this project is there's all these deep insights about how to solve the world's problems, but they're all just locked on somebody's laptop, right? They're all in one deck on one lady's laptop, and how do you push that out into the company in a better way?
Yeah, so we have a couple, again, so let's start. I keep saying framework. I've probably said it 50 times.
The next buzzword.
Yeah, well, he said velocity. So we started with innovation, framework, velocity. I think
We've hit them all.
I mean, we've got 2 more, so we hit the magic bingo number. So we start with this framework, right, and that's communicated to the entire company, which is a really great start. We also built a collaboration site. Again, this is being led out of the EES team right now. We built this big collaboration site. And what happens is, as all of our business units and bottlers go to this site, again, we have take these 15 categories of strategy. Underneath those, we actually identify the use cases that we have to enable in order to make that strategy come true. So, right, you have a strategy, you have a tactic, and then what? And so that's where we're at. So we've got people rallying around this digital framework community, and inside of that community, the people that are actually in the field, right, which is what matters at Coca-Cola. If you're in the field, you're actually there and selling stuff, right? You've been in the company, you know what's up. So when those people are the ones that are bubbling up, these are the use cases that we have to solve, and those use cases are directly connected back to a business strategy, and it's being communicated across all of the regions, right? It's 200 plus regions, so we have more members than the UN, and that you have to satisfy all of those people, and giving them one central place to be able to do that digitally, right? Not sending anybody an email, because again, who checks email? But not sending anybody an email, not putting anybody on Slack. Like, here's a great place where you can come and interact, and you can vote things up and down. That's sort of making the communication just, it's really helping everything get out there and get better.
I think that's a good point around the voting up and down, and that there's a mechanism for it. Met with a lot of companies that have tried to do something similar, building this community, and it actually fatigues the internal folks because they feel like they're taking the time and effort to share perspective, share their thoughts, and nothing moves forward. And there's no kind of, where did my idea go? And then it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel like truly that anybody's looking to hear me. They really, it was a PR play, and in many ways, or an internal communications play, but it truly wasn't of value. And so the voting mechanism maybe is your way to overcome that, so you can permeate the noise and get something to the top, and then there's action around it. But that's a bit of a cautionary tale I've heard from several large companies.
Yeah, I mean, again, he mentioned the network, right? Zach, said, you talk about the network of people, and that's the thing. I joked about Lyle being Lyle, I got a guy.
Yeah.
Right. Again, that's, if you really want to get it done, you talk to Lyle because Lyle got a guy, right? So we're flattening that, right? The organization is a lot flatter than it has been, in my time there, and we're flattening that. We're bringing, kind of bubbling things forward, right? So, before I joined Coke, I worked at Deloitte Consulting, and one of the things that we always did at Deloitte was, when you finished a project, you uploaded your materials, right? You uploaded them right to our knowledge website, you tagged it, you shared it with all your colleagues, and everybody got to see your work, and it's a thing of pride, really.
Sure.
Like, I wanted as much stuff on that site as anybody, because, to me, it was like, I'm doing all that cool stuff up there. When I first got to Coke, it was very much not like that.
Right.
People kind of kept things in their box, and that was they knew that one part of me. But flattening the organization and really kind of making us about delivery, I think has made a lot of that go away. It's so much easier now to collaborate with people, and especially in IT. I'm actually co-located with the business right now, which hasn't always been true. But I'm now, I sit right with my business clients, and so every hall conversation that happens, it's right outside my office for the most part. So. It's kind of, again, changing the DNA of the organization and changing the fabric of how we work. You start by locating people with what seems like such an obvious choice, right? Locate us with the people that we're going to be working with every day.
Yep.
Those conversations are so much easier, but giving people the right tools and the right incentive, as you mentioned earlier, the right incentive to share.
Yeah, I think that's incentives and then both system design there. And so, physically having you guys work together, not be over an email or a web call or any of those things, and then the incentive to shift to delivery. I think that, a lot of times legal, procurement, IT, those groups that are more regulation driven, they get a really bad rap. Some of it rightfully so, and some of it maybe not. To say, if you're charged with, hey, keep us out of the headlines, well, okay, well, that's what my metrics are based on, and that's what I get a bonus on, and that's what, I make my boss happy with. Well, yeah, I'm not going to maybe move ideas forward. We talk a lot about the concept around re-engineering those organizations to say, what if you incentivize them on how many opportunities they were able to get over the line? And yes, of course, that's kind of table stakes, keep us out of the news, sure. But how can you then re-engineer that? I think to your point about bringing people in early, Transparency was something that has come up, and being able to not necessarily have to own the idea. I think that a lot of times in especially older companies and larger companies, having all you feel there's a perception of value if you are the linchpin in keeping something together, whereas if everybody had visibility, then maybe there's less value of me as an individual.
Sure.
So I think that those are such cultural things to overcome. Some of it's change management, some of it's a culture of innovation, but it's people at the end of the day.
It is really, and you know, you asked for a real example earlier, and I'll give you a not so cool real example. A couple of, I don't know, I guess maybe a year and a half ago, Barry asked enterprise architecture to be responsible for all of the contracts that came to his signing, because the CIO has to sign up, you know, every MSA and all of those things. That's just how it works. And you know, a lot of people, and you know, we always take shots, right? In IT, people always take shots at IT because IT's slow. In IT, we take shots at everybody because it's legal and procurement's fault, right? That's why we're slow. We're fast. Legal and procurement take forever. So Barry asked us to, you know, take over responsibility for the contracts that came to him, because they were just coming all, there were a million contracts, and who could keep up with it? As part of that process, I had to like start meeting with the procurement people and the legal people pretty much every day. So for the first 4 months of taking over the contract process, it's what I did every day. And I've read every contract for the last year and a half at Coke, and they are long and boring. Yeah, it's crazy. But in the process of doing it, right, the number of contracts that came through goes from, you know, 100 every week down to about 5. And ultimately, you start reducing the amount of noise. That takes work off of legal and procurement. That takes work off of enterprise architecture, and that keeps people from spinning their wheels around, right? So the contract process, I would have run from that in fact, I have run from it my entire career. Like, you want me to do what? No, thanks, gotta go. Done. But in doing that, right, in learning what's coming through the gate and learning how to get it and really work like side by side with legal and procurement, you really start to understand how you can do things faster, and how you can make things real, how you can communicate with people very easily rather than 6,000 emails, because I can never read an email, and I can really not read an email if it's written by an attorney. So it's just not something I'm ever interested to do. But that process, you know, I think sort of starts opening up the door for how IT works outside of IT. And it's been invaluable, I think. It's probably been, you know, I think it's changed the way I work specifically, and the way I understand how to bring new, innovative things into the process, rather than just kind of ramming them in, which I'm pretty good at too. Again, understanding how things fit in our overall process, it just matters, and makes it so much easier to get it done.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Other questions from the audience? Karen?
So, Quincy is starting to push up more of the accountability for innovation down into the businesses. So how are you balancing out the work you're doing at a global level with what the acceleration rate of innovation is at the local level, and the need and the desire they probably have to just move forward with whatever they have locally?
So yeah, let's talk about that. There's a couple of mechanisms for that. We standardize around strategic platforms for some things. I have an architectural principle that I sort of work by, and it's, you know, you know the size of this company. We're not a one-tier model. We don't have a one-tier architecture for many things. It just doesn't work. You can't have a single standard for, you know, consumer data, for example. You're probably going to have a couple of standards. So I think what we do is we pick kind of a multi-tier strategy. Things that we can, from a technology perspective, know that we can rally around and say, that's a standard, this is how we're going to do this, and this is going to make us faster and better and all of that stuff. Stick with that. Don't veer from that path. And we have several of those that are big strategic platforms that we work on, and that's, you know, you do those, you do them well, you're able to be a lot faster. And then we have some others, right? And the others are kind of, you know, like think globally, act locally, that kind of model, where if it just works right for that market, and we don't already have something in that space, we let them go, right? Again, you can't be innovative if you're 3,000 miles away from where the innovation is supposed to happen. So how can I measure it and say, no, you can't do that? we generally try to enable that and let them go. If they're really doing something great, you know, again, I work in a big corporate office, so I don't get the opportunity to really connect things every day directly to a business problem. If they can do it, and they can bring that learning back to us, and we can share it with 200 other markets, that wins, right? That works really, really well for us. So if you know, being innovative is cool, right? But being able to have a repeatable practice that works in 200 markets is way cooler. So from a technology perspective, if they make sense, if it's not something we already have, they're off to the races because we just leverage that. I try to rally people around data standards more than anything. So that we're all working from the same toolkit of consumer data, for example, employee data. Like, we should all be working on the same toolkit around that. So that's, you know, that's it. Just when it makes sense, go.
They're standardizing the things that you feel like matter, and then not just creating barriers for barriers' sake because it's simpler to have a 1-tier or even a 2-tier.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's, you know, again, it's very easy for you to put a stamp down and say you should only use this. But if you don't work in a market that doesn't have the capacity to use that, or maybe doesn't even have the right skill set, again, we're in 200+ countries, so you have to measure skills, right? Do we have the right kind of developers to do that? Do we have the right technology sets to do that? Can you even run certain things in certain countries? You know, Amazon's not everywhere yet, so you know, can you do that? You have to balance all of that stuff. And you know, again, architecture cannot be concrete. You know, you can. It's never going to be written in stone because once it is, you're kind of dead.
I think I saw a question over here. Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned, you know, like email
And I have the coolest email address in the world.
and you know, you talked a little bit about the collaboration side that you guys have. Do you have like an internal enterprise-wide communication strategy that you do outside of email?
Let's see, which from the enterprise architecture perspective,
Or just the organization in general?
yeah, I mean, is it a strategy? Yes. You know, I'm sure we get emails that tell us stuff I just don't know. But we do have, again, we have a lot of, again, we're using the digital framework community as kind of our starting point for a lot of that. We use a lot of different tools for collaboration. You know, I think we use Chatter for a little while, we use Workplace for a little while, or we're using Workplace. Lyle could actually know that better than me. But you know, we have a lot of good tools for collaboration that people can go to and get all of the information that they need. And again, I'm sure there's an email blast that goes out from somebody, and I just don't read it. I know you think I'm kidding, but I really don't. I read like maybe 10% of my email a week because it's not effective. It's so like email is just not an effective tool for me anymore. And I'm sure people are shaking their head going, nah, you check your emails, but trust me, I don't check them. It's such a blast, and there's always such noise around it. I'd much rather go to you know, one of our internal sites and see what people are threading. Just it makes so much more sense to me because I can actually follow it, and it's about stuff that I really care about, not you know, did you approve this contract when I'm not approving that contract.
I think I saw one over here, and then I'll come to you. Go ahead.
One, since you don't check email, can I get your number after this?
Yeah, you can.
Two, you mentioned like how internally Coca-Cola comes up with the ideas and you take those on. But what about externally? I'm sure people approach you all the time with all these ideas coming outside the company. What's the process for you to accept those?
Yeah, so that kind of comes to the EA team for a lot of things. You know, it goes back to, and I mean, we get everything. I've seen, I swear I've seen more startups than, I don't even remember some of them. It's like, comes at me all the time. You know, we bring them to the EA team. Again, we look and see where these things fit. Do they fit in our stack? Is it something that we're even trying to solve, right? Like, I don't need another out of stock vendor, right? Somebody that's got another shelf that's going to tell me when things are out of stock. Don't need any more of those. I've seen them all. I've seen every one of them, even the ones that aren't built yet. And you know, we bring them through. We vet them against that tech stack. It all comes back to, you know, do we have something in this space, or is this something that's completely different, right? Because I actually like abstracts way better than the guy that comes to me and says, I can solve out of stock, and I go, yeah, you and everybody else. So, but when I hear something that's really abstract about that, an idea that I wouldn't have expected, those are the ones that kind of light me up, and those are the ones that will say, we might have something here, but this is worth looking at. So again, it's always vetted against our tech stack.
Okay. I've got someone to run past you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I came a little bit late, so.
No, you missed a great intro.
It's
gone way downhill from there.
When I came in, I could sense the energy in the room. I have like maybe two quick sub questions of each other. How being that at Coke, there's a substantial amount of technical debt or legacy debt, technical debt that you have to deal with on a regular basis, right? Being that, you know, startups are in vogue now, right? And how do you delineate your time to like filter all of these new technologies and people, but at the same time, most of your energy has to be spent to ensuring legacy technical systems, ensuring the data is right. And then that goes to my next question, which is, how do you keep testing your assumptions? Because if you really think about it, your metrics are based on sales. So you have to be able to tie, because we did this, this is resulting in sales. Like, how are you able to...
You're writing my resume.
No, it's a really hard job. So I'm just kind of curious how you're dealing with those things.
So let's get back to let's start with the first question. You'll probably have to remind me in a second. But, you know, how do we balance that, right? It's a whole team, right? It's not just me. There's, you know, roughly 20 people on our team that do this. Luckily, you know, again, I'll give the credit to Barry and Ed and Alan, the guys that really started, you know, building out what enterprise architecture should look like. Luckily, I'm not really tasked with doing a lot of operational stuff. You know, reading log files and things like that, we don't do a lot of that. When I first joined, we were actually chartered with not thinking about the problems for today, but, you know, think about the problems we're gonna have 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. Like that's the ones you can solve. You know, tell me where, don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where it's gonna be, right? And so that, I don't really get tasked with a lot of operational stuff. That being said, you know, I was a Java developer and I'm a Python programmer, and I learned programming languages like some kind of weird talent that I have. I learned programming languages really fast. So I do get pulled into those things, but it's always as advisory. We're always thinking more in terms of, our team is always thinking more in terms of not operational, but really strategic, and how to move and how to get things in the right place and how to pick the right tools so that people can do that, and hopefully pick the right tools that they're not worrying about a lot of technical debt. We have it, right, as any big company does. We have technical debt, but we're freeing ourselves of a lot of it. We're freeing ourselves of a lot of that. And most of that is, you know, moving things to a cloud. Really simplify your environment a great deal. You know, moving some things to a cloud isn't really that much simple, or that much more simple, but at the end of the day, we've simplified our environment greatly, so we don't do a ton of operational stuff. Your second question, I think, was how do I look at startups being in vogue? Like, how do I do that? Again, there's a team of 20 people, and I know startups are in vogue. I grew up in San Francisco. You know, that's my whole life has been around people that are, you know, I've got this startup or that startup, and oddly enough, I've only worked at like one. Whether it's a startup or whether it's a huge company that comes to us with a great idea, and you have to look at all of them. And so I mean I do, right? I look at all of them. That's my job. And you know, that's actually what they pay me to do, so I don't have to do too much other stuff. But sort of consistently figuring out how to make those things real is probably the harder part. So I see a ton of startups. My whole team sees a ton of startups. When I'm overloaded, I pass them off to everybody else, and everybody gets to it. Mr. Gordon.
Yeah. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about what you mentioned with the abstract? You know, it makes a lot of sense when people have an idea that's geared. It's perfect for Coca-Cola. I've got this great idea, you know, and carrying that through. But A, kind of how you seek out those abstract ideas, and B, how you kind of realize to work backwards and realize how you can apply that to the structures that you have.
Yeah. So I know I've been joking about out of stock, so I'll sort of talk about this really great idea that came to us. An abstract idea, right? There's a company called Bring in Tel Aviv that created, it was basically like an Uber for the enterprise, right? And it wasn't the drivers, it wasn't the cars, it wasn't any of that, but it's the technology that actually enabled that stuff. And it was like, oh, this is really interesting. And we were kind of figuring out, like, well, what would we do with that? And the guy who actually created the software said, you could solve out of stock with us. And I said, oh God, really, again? And the idea was that we would enable this network of people that basically we had these drivers and we let people sign up, and when something ran out of stock, they'd get a notification just like an Uber driver, and they'd drive it to whatever store needed to be stocked up. Abstract idea, kind of hit me funny. I just couldn't figure out why we were talking about it, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute. So how do we look? I mean, how do I look for the abstract? To be honest, it takes people way smarter than me. because if you know, again, I see a lot of different startup guys, and a lot of those startup people come in and kind of look at what we're talking about. I'm really just kind of pitch to them the story, and a lot of the abstract stuff comes out through just conversation, right? And you know, different ways to look at things. Again, I think that's why you go look for startup companies, is that you want them to look at our problems without the lens of Coca-Cola, without 7 years of Coca-Cola history. You want them to look at it that way, and then sort of change the way we're thinking about doing it. So you know, a good abstract concept. To his question, I look at almost every startup that comes to me. Everyone that gets in front of me, I look at them all. You know, maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't, or maybe something bounces off my head, or somebody brings me an idea and says, you know what, you could use that for that. And so it's not a formal thing, right? When you go to looking at abstract, but people who are a lot smarter than I am are really good at finding stuff like that.
Can someone with a phone and/or watch give me a time check? Thank you. 10 minutes. Okay, let's do maybe 3 more questions if there are some. Go ahead.
Innovation's pretty tough to define and even harder to measure. How do you measure success for some of these tools or products you roll out? And how do you measure success in your job?
Oh, wow. How do I measure success for tools and products? You know, adoption, right? Really simple at Coke, it's adoption. But I also don't really care if it's adoption. You know what I mean? Like, you learn a lot by trying stuff. You know, you learn a lot by trying stuff and failing. And I know that sounds really cliche. But at the end of the day, you learn a lot by being able to do that. Just having the landscape to go try something out on, and see if it works, right? And see if Bring works, right? See if we can actually solve out of stock with that. See if another shelf that has a counter on it can solve out of stock. I'm good with it. It doesn't matter if it doesn't really matter if you fail. But again, at the end of the day, I want to see things succeed, and I really think things are successful when they work in more than one market. Right, so for us, some markets are really, some markets are just flush with cash, and other markets not so much. So if something works in North America, and it works as well in Manila, right? Like that's great, and that's really good success. And we have a lot of examples of that. And how do I measure success in my job? Honestly, I measure it by how happy the people that work for me are. Because again, I have a big fancy title and a big office and all of that stuff. But if the people that work for me aren't really happy and they're not really like enjoying what they're doing, or they're not being challenged, then I'm not doing it right. And so how do I measure success? I have a great team of people around me, and they like what they do. If they stay that way and they stay happy, and more importantly, again, kind of your point, if they leave and go do something else, and they go out to other companies and they say, you know what, I work for this guy back at Coke, I'm good. I'm good with that.
Cool. Karen?
You just mentioned several times talking about your team. Could you talk more about your team when you came in? Was it already in place? How did you put it in place? How it's built over time? Those kinds of things?
Yeah.
And how do you use them?
Yeah, so, when we first came in, my former boss, guy named Alan Boehm, really just came in with the charter of assembling an enterprise architecture team, a quirky, kind of weird enterprise architecture team that didn't do governance. And so he called me first, oddly enough. So he called me. So we assembled the team, and we assembled it with a mix of people from, kind of my background, some folks in Silicon Valley, but then we also found what I think were the best people at Coke. Right? So we had people that had been at Coke for a little while, maybe weren't in enterprise architecture, and I basically just went on an inside recruiting job to try and get some people into the company, or into our team. I felt like at a company like Coke, you have to have the history, but you have to have, you also have to have a little bit of recklessness to be able to, kind of be able to be disruptive and move forward. And so we did that. We grabbed some of the best people around, we kind of integrated everybody into this team. We were small in the beginning. I think there was only 10 of us in the very start, maybe less. And through the course of the years that I've been there, I've added some people I added a user experience portion, because I really feel like user experience is super important to enterprise architecture. A lot of people don't get that, but you build a great system and it's really ugly and nobody wants to use it. Who cares? So I felt like so we built a user experience part. We sort of added into. We have data scientists now. So we've evolved the team to look a little bit more like maybe a traditional enterprise architecture team, but a little bit more of a, we do skunk works for sure. And we do those things, but we're definitely doing skunk works on things that matter to the company. So we just evolved to sort of fit the mold of what Barry's cast, which is, be about delivery and be about effective delivery fast. And so we just kind of keep building the team from that. And we're still a good mix of old guys and young guys and new guys and guys that have been around for a little while. Was there a second part to that? Did you ask what
How you use them?
how I use them?
Or, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
How do you work with them? I don't.
No, exactly. How are they best utilized in their role?
Yeah, the question stunned me for a second. You know what? So we break up by domains, right? So everybody takes responsibility for a domain, and everybody kind of rallies and takes. You have to learn everything about that domain, because I don't want specialists, but I don't want generalists either, right? And that's just a thing, and it's like impossible to match. But if you have somebody that only knows one thing, they're probably not a great enterprise architect. But if they know one thing really well and they can expand that across many domains, that's pretty good. So we sort of organize around domains, but then we all kind of collectively get back together and decide, okay, how does integration fit into the rest of these domains? How do simple things like security, right? That's so simple. How does security work across all these layers? So we're really organized by domain, and we work a lot on, again, for the last year and a half, we work a lot on the big problems and the big things that we're trying to solve as a company.
We have two last questions, Cortland and then Anand, and then that's it. Go ahead, Cortland.
So you mentioned a lot of things and new initiatives and innovation, it has to learn and turn. How do you kill stuff? Any good advice on making stuff go?
Yeah, you know what? Get a CIO like my CIO, who, when it doesn't make sense, right? And again, how do you kill stuff? We measure things against this digital framework, or this framework for growth. Is the work that we're doing supporting that? And if it's not, it's out. And it's the clearest, and there's social engineering, and there's a lot of different stuff that goes on around that. But again, I have a CIO that I sit with, a couple times a month, I guess. We go through the contract process, we go through things that are happening just in the organization in general, and if it doesn't make sense and it's not on the roadmap, we just don't go forward. And it sounds easier than it is. It's not. Trust me, people get grumpy and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, leadership. That's what happens. Leadership makes that happen. Yeah. And getting people fighting over sacred cows and stuff like that, that's just not gonna. That just doesn't work, right? That makes a company stay old and slow.
Yeah. Thanks.
Last question of the day.
Hey, really enjoyed the conversation so far, so thanks for sharing. What is the learning from failure kind of in your organization? What does that look like, and how do you use that to encourage growth as an organization and within the people within it?
Yeah, well, learning from failure, it's not being afraid to do it, I guess. How do you do that? Again, good leaders, right? Good leaders that know you're trying stuff and realize that some things are just not going to work out. We do a lot just internally when things haven't worked for like bridge companies or something like this. We do a lot of that stuff. We kind of share it out, right? It's about again, how do you learn from something and call a fail a win, right? And the way you do that is you keep others from doing it, right? That's such an easy way to start by saying failure is okay. Because if I save 200 other markets from doing something, I've actually done something really good. So again, how do you do that? We're putting these things online, we're showing people what we're doing, we're connecting them to the right resources that are doing it. So if they want to try it, they can go get those user stories, and they can get started, and they can kind of learn from what people have done wrong. I think, again, that's the part about the culture that's shifted a lot over the last few years, to let people kind of feel free about doing that stuff. So, we try it, we share it with everybody. I don't mind failing, I don't mind doing something that doesn't work. And then I tell everybody about it. So, again, just being absolutely not afraid to tell everybody, oh yeah, that didn't work. Either I didn't do it right, or the organization wasn't ready for it, or whatever. If you can save 200 other people or 200 other markets from doing stuff like that works.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, Bill, this was a fabulous conversation. Yes, I really appreciate it. I think that we hear a lot from folks that sit maybe in a bit of a more generalist innovation role, or someone that maybe singularly is tasked. And I think hearing from your world of this blend between technology and innovation and how you're enabling the rest of the business was super fascinating for me. So thank you. A round of applause for Bill, please.